So, Bruno Groening over and over again called people to what's been translated as the great turnaround, the great reversal. But what exactly does that mean? Well, I came to understand it a little better when I looked up the German word, and another one of the meanings is complete change. And to me, that's what has the most resonance. Christ, and then Bruno came to remind us of this, calls us to a completely different way of life than the way we've led before, even if we've already thought of ourselves as spiritual people, as good people, which that's how I viewed myself when I found this teaching. But what I soon came to recognize is that while yes, I was striving to be a good person, and yes, I was on the spiritual path, I I was the one sort of like in charge of the path. Like, oh, I'm going to read this book and I'll do this practice and I'll. So, in a sense, I was seeking God, but it was me that was sort of in charge of the process. And what I've learned from Bruno and learning that, I've been able to understand what Christ taught is that, really the essence of the spiritual life is about surrendering to God, surrendering to a higher power, and letting it guide us. And I was very humbled to realize that yes, I'd been striving for God all these years, striving for enlightenment, but it was like I was trying to be in charge of the process. Which when we really think about it, you can use the word ego can help highlight this a little bit. It's like the ego being in charge of trying to transcend the ego. It doesn't work so well. So, Bruno called us to totally turn around and turn around from what you can call selfishness, that can be a bit of a complicated word, but to really turn around from guiding ourselves, from being in charge of our life, and letting God, literally letting the divine be the ruler, be the guide, um, be in charge of our lives. You know, Bruno spoke of being a servant of God. But what does that mean? Well, he put it really simply that if you want to succeed, follow God. That means moment by moment. And of course, it starts off with a practice, where we might sit and close our eyes and literally ask, like, okay, God, what's next? Like seeking God's will. And we don't have to do it with words, seeking, okay, love. What's the loving thing to do? And then doing it. And then eventually, what we're seeking is to be led moment by moment to where we're following the divine, where we really become what Bruno Groening called instruments of God, where that divine energy, that love, is literally acting through us. I sometimes think of it as being possessed by God. And of course, possession has some negative connotations to it because we normally think of evil spirits sort of possessing and taking control. But what we're after is sort of emptying out what you could call our small self. And Bruno um, actually used that term, the little self, the little person, and then letting God act through us, literally becoming an instrument, a channel of God. And I believe that's what Christ and Bruno meant by being a servant of God, to where moment by moment, it's just God acting through us. Life, love, harmony. acting through us. And of course, that's a complete change, a complete reversal to how most of us have lived our lives. The image of Jesus calling the disciples and them completely leaving their life behind and following, um, that, which I assume that's more or less how it happened. That's the life we're called to. That doesn't mean we have to leave our house and leave our job. Um, but some people might be called to that, but that sense of literally just making that decision and then seeking to follow God moment by moment, seeking to follow the guidance of a higher power, seeking to let a helper, a teacher, a spiritual friend, such as Bruno Groening, such as Christ, moment by moment, lead us through life. So, in some sense, it's a little shocking, when we read, Jesus just walked up and was like, "Follow me." And they did. And that's my understanding of what the great turnaround, the great reversal is all about. Leaving behind not so much the specifics of our life, but the way of life, us as being in charge, and really seeking to follow, to be led, to be servants, to be instruments of God.